So today I have with me Rob Boese with WHSE Partners out of Southern California. How you doing today, Rob?
Good, Lance. How are you?
Good. So we're just going to ask a few questions today. So, the one I always like to kind of get out of the way, first of all, is just to have an understanding of how you ended up in the real estate business. What's your origin story?
So I was really thrown into it at a really young age. My parents had a mixed-use portfolio, primarily medical office. And so they got me started really early at the ground level, leasing, property management, asset management, that type of thing. When I was a teenager, medical office, as a lot of people know, is a very difficult asset class on the operational level. Doctors and pharmaceutical companies are usually prickly tenants. And so having exposure to that at a young age on leasing and property management, really the front line, was sort of trial by fire. And so I kind of grew up in business. And for a teenager, it's terrible work, right? It's not really what you want to do. You want to be out playing with your friends or doing something else. And so I lost my parents at an early age, both to cancer. And so I inherited this portfolio. And so we led a disposition program. And so we were able to dispose of the assets right before the recession. And around 2007, I was able to move to New York City and finally do the things that young people want to do. And so I did leasing, I did investments, and the recession really hit for me, cratered in 2009 when there were no deals, right? The deal flow was zero. And the deal flow for my peers was zero. And my girlfriend at the time, now my wife, was from Fresno, and she said, "Hey, Rob, I'm going to move back to Fresno. You're welcome to join me." And since nothing was happening in New York, it sounded like an appealing option. And so I said, "Okay, let's do it. Let's move to California." It's been unusual because most people don't leave New York City for Fresno, California. But 11 years later, here I am. And it turned out to be one of the best moves we ever made. When I got to Fresno, there was nothing really happening. There was even less deal activity out here. But I was fortunate enough to get a position at an asset management, property management leasing firm, and got to work on a family office portfolio that happened to be multi-tenant metal warehouse. And that was one asset class that I had never worked, and I didn't know that much about it. And so this particular family office had developed it, leased it, managed it for over 30 years. And so fitting that in a context of professional property management, asset management was a very difficult dynamic. And as you know, most family offices have different criteria rather than a real estate investment. They provide opportunity for family. They want to keep the asset going, whether it generates money or not. And so they had a lot of vacancy. They had a lot of operational obsolescence, a lot of challenges that for real estate professionals are pretty apparent. But balancing that in a family office context to keep everybody happy is a very, very difficult work. And so they let that firm that I was working for go. And so they let my department go. And suddenly I was out of work. And the family office approached me and said, "Hey, Rob, we really like you. And we understand that you really like this asset class for whatever reason, and you get it." And I said, "Yeah, I like it. And I do get it. And there's a lot of potential here that has left, we still have to realize over a period of time." And they said, "Great, we're not going to offer you a job." And I said, "Okay, that's nice. So what are we talking about?" And they said, "You're not a member of the family, so we can't have you work within the family office. You're going to have to start your own company." And working for my family, I always thought that I, ran my own company. And so it was really an opportunity for me, and I really seized upon it. And so we set up a company that did asset management, property management, leasing. I was fortunate to have a large client out of the get-go. So we had 30 properties and primarily multi-tenant metal warehouse. 2,000 square foot was our general unit size, and we had 250 tenants. And it was a lot to take on. And the firm didn't really take off until our key hire, which was Erin Volpp, who's now Erin Volpp, and our partner on WHSE Partners. And that was really the genesis of understanding that asset class, getting our hands on it, and kind of growing that business. And we really thought that this is a good business for a family office developer, manager, and helping them sustain that business. We always thought that we could do it a little bit better for investors and really eke out the returns that we thought that were kind of left on the table or they didn't really look to push, right? We wanted to push that envelope and really create those efficiencies, especially on the operational side, right? We saw the things that needed to get done, and we just need to execute those. And we always thought if we had the opportunity to do this for ourselves or for investors, let's do it. And so that was really the genesis behind Warehouse Partners is, okay, we're really good at doing this for other people on a third-party management, asset management, leasing side. Let's offer to ourselves and investors, and let's all make money together. We think it could be really profitable. And so now we're really excited about Warehouse Partners.
Oh, very good. That's cool. So how do you guys source your deal flow? Like what's your acquisition strategy then to find those kind of opportunities?
So one of the things that we found out about the asset class really fast was a lot of the assets were built in the 70s and 80s. And because they were so successful, right? Because the demand was there for small warehouses. We're not talking about big Amazon distribution facilities. We're talking about small metal warehouses, small unit size, 2,000 square feet with a small office and roll-up door. It wasn't really the sexy asset that, big investors are outsourcing giant deals for, but the demand was there. And so when you see demand and low availability, that's a good dynamic for us. And so when we see high demand for small unit industrial and almost zero availability, that's a good market for us. And so it's really simple, right? Demand and low availability, or competition that's obsolete, right? Or has some sort of functional obsolescence or challenges that they can't get over, whether they're a family office or they're just content to be because it makes money. Mm-hmm. So if we offer a newer product that has advantages, we think that that's a attractive proposition for tenants and investors. Whatever it is we're trying to do, the opportunity is there. And it's particularly in California, and particularly in our market in Central California, we do think that there is plenty of opportunities in a lot of different markets.
Got it. Yeah. With that said, within that sort of Southern California market, I mean, what are those key markets, and what is it about those markets that kind of drive this dynamic?
So it's sort of the industrial hub of California, right? And so one of the key things that we look for is the cheap availability of land if we're going to do a construction project. So operating in Los Angeles and San Francisco is nice, but the acquisition of the land is going to be astronomical. Mm-hmm. That on top of construction and commanding a lease rate that makes sense for investors to turn a return to give a good return for investors is tricky. But in Central California, you have industrial demand, you have, Amazon has distribution facilities here, and a lot of large companies ship goods to and fro. We have open spaces, so we have the availability of land. We can acquire cheap enough, right? We have hard costs like construction, but we also have pent-up leasing demand. And so if we can get the land and we can do a construction project where we have little headway, right? The entitlements, the zoning is in place, the land is acquired cheap enough. We know our construction from A to B, right? What it is that goes into the project, a well thought out project. We can deliver a project that is far and above, any other competing project, if there is a competing project, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's really where we drive it, right? We're satisfying demand where it's been pent up for many years, or if it's being satisfied, it's being satisfied in a way that's not really, satisfying what it is that logistically tenants are looking for, or logistically, what could come onto the market in terms of multi-tenant industrial, in terms of for sale, right? And if you think about multi-tenant industrial, you rarely see those assets come for sale because they generate so much cash. There's not really, unless there's some sort of generational shift or there's a demand for capital, those assets very rarely of significant size come available for sale. And so we noticed that early on. And so we said, let's do our own project, and we can either deliver it for ourselves, investors, or if it's out for disposition, surely there's going to be plenty of people that are going to be looking at this asset because there's no competing assets on the market.
Yep. So like when you guys find a project, then, I mean, what's sort of your criteria, like your investment philosophy? Like what are the things that, like you mentioned, like the cheap availability of land and those sorts of things. But I mean, what are those key criteria that the boxes you have to check in order for it to say, this is a project we can pursue or to acquire?
Sure. That's a great question. So for us, it's the nexus between, market population, right? We want a dense population, but we also want it close to a freeway, right? And so you have goods and services being delivered, right? If it's close to a large distribution facility, such as an Amazon and some other key criteria. But the ability of moving goods and services and a dense population area where there's not enough industrial development, that's really the name of the game for us. Mm-hmm. And so freeway, proximity to other industrial, that type of thing, that's really what we're looking for. And we like small businesses. And when we talk about Central California, we're not talking about large corporations. We're talking about a lot of small businesses. Mm-hmm. And so it's nice. We can support a lot of American small businesses through these projects, whereas before they would have to operate out of a garage, let's say, or they would be looking at too much warehouse and they would have to split it up or whatever the case may be. So one of the nice things for us is that we can deliver an asset where in good times they move up through their garage into one of our warehouse partner spaces, or if in down times or in challenging economic times, they're moving down from 10,000, 15,000 or 5,000, whatever the case may be, is they're moving their operation to a smaller facility, waiting for times to get better. And so it's a good asset in good times and bad.
Yeah, that makes sense. So like for you guys, when you get a hold of an asset, whether you're developing it from ground up or you've acquired it for like a value add play, I mean, what are sort of, how do you guys, mitigate risk? How do you kind of what's your main kind of execution strategy? Like, how do you guys generate that value?
So for us, it's about minimal headwinds. We're looking for things that have zoning entitlements in place, on and offsite improvements. So if we're going to do a build, we're going to do a build and it's going to happen quickly, because essentially the construction type we have is a metal shack on a concrete base with a parking lot, right? To make it really simple.
Yeah.
And so we want to deliver a development asset within 12 months, right? So that's certificate of occupancy and that it's ready for tenants. And so we want to mitigate risk, just like we mitigate risk with tenants. Is the asset is a multi-tenant asset. So if one tenant goes away, you're not all in on one tenant. It's not a single tenant deal. And the same thing is for us, is whether we're doing value add or we're doing a development project. These projects, they could be sizable, 100,000 square feet, but there's going to be a number of them happening concurrently. And so we mitigate risk because you have multiple projects. And since we've done enough due diligence and we know that the projects are going to be successful, some of them are going to be home runs and some of them are going to be challenges. And we know that just the nature of real estate, and, things take longer than we want or whatever the challenge may be. But since we're doing a number of them and we've done enough due diligence, we know that a number of them are going to be delivered either on time or ahead of schedule. And really the due diligence is about discovering what it is about this parcel or what it is about this site that we can generate the return in a fast and efficient manner for our investors, right? Let's do this fast, right? We're not carrying the asset for 10 or 15 years where the economy might, go through a number of different shifts. We're trying to complete a project in a really tight timeline. And if we can do that, then the risk is mitigated by a short window, right? Mm-hmm. And don't let me underestimate the amount of due diligence that goes into the project, right? These are well thought out projects and they're very specific. We're not outsourcing deals left and right. This is for a multi-tenant warehouse of a very specific size and build type. We're very focused on the type of project that we want to do.
But how about absorption, or like when you were acquiring the assets and kind of turning them around? I mean, what is it that you're doing on the leasing side, since it's kind of, where you've come from? I mean, what are you doing maybe that others aren't doing in terms of execution and filling it up? And I mean, is there anything, is it really just the fact, like you said, is that if you go to the right place where there's not enough of it, those, you've got a tailwind? Is that, or is there more to it?
There is a secret sauce, and the secret sauce is really the layout of the warehouse. And one of the nice things about multi-tenant metal warehouse is that tenant improvements are minimal. And if you're going to do a tenant improvement, it's a metal shack with a drywall office, right, and a bathroom. And so changing the layout is not astronomical, but we know the layout that the tenants need to be efficient, right? And we've seen other projects where people have done multi-tenant and industrial and it hasn't gone well. And there's a very specific reason. And part of that is the layout of the units and the operational excellence, right? And so it has to be managed. The property management, leasing, asset management, the whole thing has to work as a system. And you have to have experience doing it. Doing one-off projects and hoping for the best is not a recipe for success. And so seeing the whole project from start to finish, but having that vision of seeing what it is at the end is really the name of the game.
Mm-hmm.
And so really the secret sauce in terms of leasing is, what is it that works best for tenants, right? What is it that works for best in terms of layout for the entire project? And seeing that and realizing that and achieving it, that's really where you drive profits. And so you'll see multi-tenant industrial projects that are significant in size, but they're not doing well for whatever reason. And it's because they're missing one of those elements or all of those elements. And it becomes a really big challenge. And so a lot of people are put off by multi-tenant industrial because they see it as being too hard. It's not too hard. It just has to be done correctly.
Yeah. Very good. So in terms of like the team, executing this strategy, obviously got yourself, you've been in it. You mentioned Erin. Maybe you could share a little bit about her, and if there's any others, service providers or vendors or those who kind of, you've teamed up with to execute the strategy. Share a little bit about them.
Sure, absolutely. And obviously a key player in Warehouse Partners is the partner, Erin Volpp. She's the one who really makes things go behind the scenes. And so, when you talk about investments, you're typically going to interface with me, but the person who really makes things happen is Erin Volpp. And she joined us early on, and that's really where, our asset management and investments really took off, is when she was able to corral all the different elements of that type of business and streamline it, right? And she's very good at streamlining and marketing and operational excellence. In terms of the other professionals that we work with, key personalities, we outsource very specific operational parts of Warehouse Partners. So if it's a land use consultant, that specific person works on land use. If it's design build, that specific firm or person will work on design build. So we don't really have bleed over, or there's no competing objectives. We don't have a property management division that's waiting to be employed, or people sitting around, or we don't have to create a project to keep other professionals occupied or employed. And so we use them when we need them. And so we pass that value on to the investors. And so there's an efficiency there. So we like working with the professionals who know the business the best, and we work with them on a project basis. But in terms of Warehouse Partners, when you work with Warehouse Partners, you're working with Rob Boese and you're working with Erin Volpp, and you work with us directly.
Good. Well, it's great. Well, thank you so much for your time, Rob. Have a great one. Take care.
Thank you. I appreciate it.